World War II in the Pacific began not merely as a conflict of nations but as a clash of wills and strategy, and for the United States, the shock of Pearl Harbor on December 7, 1941, brought a sudden and devastating awakening. As battleships burned, planes were destroyed on the tarmac, and thousands of American lives were lost in a matter of hours, leaving the nation reeling and vowing to strike back, to remind the world and Japan itself that America would not be defeated. And in the months following that attack, military planners and leaders understood that a direct response was not only necessary to restore national pride but also to demonstrate to Japan that its homeland was vulnerable, and thus Operation Doolittle was conceived, an audacious plan in which 16 Ba-25 bombers would be launched from the aircraft carrier USS Hornet hundreds of miles from the Japanese coast. A feat considered nearly impossible because such bombers had never before taken off from a carrier in the middle of the Pacific. And yet the mission demanded courage, precision, and absolute coordination, and Captain James Doolittle, a young, sharp, and fearless pilot, was selected to lead this operation, bringing together a crew of equally brave men who understood the risks involved, knowing that some would not return and that every decision they made would be measured in lives and the broader impact on the war. And in preparation for this mission, the pilots trained relentlessly, learning to take off in modified bombers that were stripped to reduce weight, practicing on short runways and simulating carrier launches, while technicians and engineers worked tirelessly to ensure that each plane was perfectly balanced, fueled, and armed with the bombs that would deliver America's first strike on the Japanese homeland. And aboard the USS Hornet, the crew experienced a mix of anxiety and anticipation, aware that every hour of preparation brought them closer to history. And on the morning of April 18, 1942, the 16 planes launched in the pre-dawn darkness, engines roaring as they climbed over the endless expanse of the Pacific, navigating through storms, unpredictable winds, and the constant threat of enemy reconnaissance, while pilots maintained focus, aware that any mistake could mean disaster. And as they approached Tokyo, the tension reached its peak, and the sight of the city lights below, sprawling and unaware, reminded them that the civilians were oblivious to the deadly message about to arrive. And then, with precision, bombs were released, falling on industrial targets, military facilities, and supply depots, causing fires, destruction, and chaos, but more importantly, delivering a psychological blow that reverberated through the Japanese leadership, as they realized for the first time that the enemy could strike the heart of their nation, a realization that shattered their sense of invincibility and forced an immediate reallocation of defenses, spreading their forces thinner and indirectly aiding future American operations. And while some planes were forced to crash land or ditch due to fuel shortages, and some crews were captured, the mission was deemed a success because it achieved its strategic aim, sending a powerful message that America had arrived in the war in earnest. And the bravery of Captain Doolittle and his men became legendary, inspiring the nation, raising morale, and proving that courage, planning, and audacity could overcome seemingly impossible odds. And in the months that followed, the lessons of the Doolittle Raid informed larger strategies across the Pacific theater, as American forces moved to secure Midway, Guadalcanal, and later Iwo Jima and Okinawa, applying intelligence, superior firepower, and relentless determination, while Japanese forces, stretched thin and psychologically shaken, struggled to mount effective countermeasures, leading to a gradual but unstoppable advance of American troops toward Japan. And as the war progressed, American industrial output, training, and tactical innovations outpaced the Japanese capacity to replace losses, creating a cumulative effect in which every raid, every landing, and every naval engagement brought the United States closer to the ultimate goal of compelling Japan to surrender, culminating in the devastating air raids on major cities, including the firebombing of Tokyo, which destroyed vast portions of the city, caused immense civilian casualties, and demonstrated that Japan could no longer protect its own territory. And yet, despite these attacks, Japanese leadership continued to resist, adhering to a code of honor and nationalism that valued sacrifice over surrender, leading the United States to consider alternative strategies. ultimately resulting in the development and deployment of atomic weapons in August 1945, which, combined with the Soviet declaration of war, finally compelled Japan to capitulate, ending World War II. And reflecting on this arc from Pearl Harbor to surrender, it becomes clear that America's success was not due to a single battle or weapon but through a combination of courage, strategy, psychological impact, intelligence, industrial capacity, and the willingness to take calculated risks, starting with a small, audacious raid over Tokyo that proved a nation could strike fear, inspire hope, and shift the balance of power through bravery, planning, and unwavering determination, leaving a legacy that reshaped global geopolitics and defined the modern understanding of warfare and heroism in a time when ordinary men and women faced extraordinary challenges, demonstrating that the impact of a single operation, when executed with precision and resolve, can resonate far beyond its immediate physical results, altering the course of history and inspiring generations to come. Following the audacity of the Doolittle Raid, American forces realized that the war in the Pacific would be decided not by singular moments of courage alone but by sustained strategy, intelligence, and relentless pressure on Japanese positions across the vast oceanic expanse. And as the months progressed, the United States Navy, strengthened by lessons learned and bolstered by newly built aircraft carriers, aircraft, and trained pilots, began preparing for the decisive Battle of Midway in June 1942, a confrontation that would become a turning point in the Pacific theater, where the ability to intercept and decode Japanese communications allowed American commanders to anticipate enemy movements and set up a carefully planned ambush, sinking 4 Japanese aircraft carriers while losing only 1 American carrier, a catastrophic blow from which Japan would never fully recover. And this victory not only halted Japanese expansion but also demonstrated the critical importance of intelligence, coordination, and calculated risk, emboldening American planners to adopt an offensive posture across the Pacific, and thus began the era of island hopping, a strategy in which Americans would selectively target key islands to capture airfields, bypassing heavily fortified positions that could drain resources. And this approach allowed forces to move closer to the Japanese mainland while systematically weakening enemy supply lines and communication networks, as soldiers, sailors, and airmen faced not only physical danger from entrenched defenders but also the psychological stress of relentless combat, disease, and the oppressive heat and humidity of the Pacific Islands. And yet, despite these challenges, American forces adapted, innovated, and persisted, with battles such as Guadalcanal marking the first sustained land offensive against Japanese forces, where every inch of progress was paid for in blood, sweat, and sheer determination. And then came the brutal campaigns of Iwo Jima and Okinawa, where Japanese defenders employed desperate tactics, fighting to the last man, and the famous flag raising on Mount Suribachi became a symbol of American courage and tenacity, while at the same time demonstrating the horrific human cost of these island battles, with tens of thousands of soldiers and civilians dying in protracted engagements. And yet each of these victories brought the United States closer to Japan, enabling long-range bombers to strike the mainland with increasing frequency, devastating cities, industrial complexes, and transportation networks, weakening both military and civilian morale. And as American forces tightened the noose, Japanese leadership clung to the hope of negotiation or a miraculous reversal, while ordinary civilians endured starvation, fire bombings, and the psychological terror of constant air raids. And in response, American leaders faced the unprecedented dilemma of an invasion of the Japanese homeland, projected to cost millions of lives, leading to the decision to employ the newly developed atomic bomb, a weapon of unimaginable destructive power. And on August 6, 1945, the city of Hiroshima was obliterated in an instant, tens of thousands killed immediately, with countless more suffering from radiation, shock, and devastation. And only 3 days later, Nagasaki experienced the same catastrophic destruction, sending an undeniable message to the Japanese leadership that continued resistance would result in total annihilation. And combined with the Soviet Union's declaration of war and rapid advances in Manchuria, These events finally forced Emperor Hirohito and his council to surrender on August 15, 1945, bringing an end to World War II and demonstrating that the combination of courage, strategy, intelligence, industrial capacity, and calculated escalation could overcome even the most fanatical enemy resistance. And reflecting on this journey from Pearl Harbor to Tokyo, Midway, Guadalcanal, Iwo Jima, Okinawa, and finally Hiroshima and Nagasaki, it becomes evident that America's victory over Japan was neither accidental nor the result of sheer force alone, but of a coordinated, relentless campaign that integrated psychological operations, technological innovation, logistical planning, and the heroism of ordinary men and women who operated under extreme conditions, taking calculated risks to achieve extraordinary outcomes. And this legacy reshaped global power structures, established the United States as a dominant superpower, and serves as a historic example of how strategy, courage, and perseverance can alter the course of human events, proving that even in the face of overwhelming odds, careful planning, intelligence, and audacity can achieve the seemingly impossible, leaving behind a lesson for generations that wars are won not only by firepower but by vision, adaptability, and the unyielding spirit of those who dare to confront the impossible with conviction and honor. And the Doolittle Raid, which started as a daring, almost suicidal mission over Tokyo, thus became the spark that ignited a campaign of relentless pressure, island by island, battle by battle, raid by raid, culminating in the surrender of a nation and the end of a war that had engulfed the globe. A testament to the courage of the men who risked everything in tiny bombers launched from a carrier hundreds of miles away, to a strategy that spanned thousands of miles across the Pacific, ultimately proving that strategic brilliance and unwavering courage could change the destiny of nations and alter the course of history forever. Following the unprecedented destruction of Hiroshima and Nagasaki, the Japanese leadership, including Emperor Hirohito, faced an impossible choice between continued resistance that would result in total annihilation or surrender that would preserve the remnants of the nation, and after days of deliberation, Japan officially surrendered on August 15, 1945, marking the end of World War II and solidifying the United States' position as a global superpower. Yet the path to this moment was paved not only with technological innovation but with relentless courage, strategic planning, and countless acts of heroism across the Pacific theater, from the audacity of the Doolittle Raid, which demonstrated the vulnerability of the Japanese homeland and shook enemy confidence, to the critical intelligence breakthroughs that enabled victory at Midway, where American codebreakers deciphered Japanese plans and allowed U.S. forces to ambush and decimate their carrier fleet, altering the course of the war. And the grueling campaigns on islands such as Guadalcanal, Tarawa, Iwo Jima, and Okinawa tested the limits of human endurance, as soldiers faced entrenched enemies willing to fight to the death, while surviving under extreme conditions of heat, disease, and scarcity. And every landing, every firefight, and every bomb dropped was part of a broader strategy designed to cripple Japan's ability to wage war, as the United States applied the principles of island hopping, bypassing heavily fortified islands and capturing strategically significant locations to establish airfields and cut enemy supply lines, gradually tightening the noose around the Japanese Empire. And the combination of relentless offensive pressure, superior industrial output, and psychological impact created a situation in which Japan's military and civilian leadership could no longer maintain the illusion of invincibility. And even as Japanese civilians endured fire bombings that destroyed cities, killed tens of thousands and left millions homeless, the American leadership grappled with the moral and strategic complexities of ending the war while minimizing further loss of life on both sides, leading to the development and deployment of atomic weapons, unprecedented in their destructive power and psychological effect. And the choice to use these bombs was influenced by calculations of projected casualties from a mainland invasion, which could have resulted in millions of deaths, making the immediate demonstration of overwhelming force a decisive factor in compelling surrender. And as the bombs were dropped, the shockwaves of destruction were instantaneous and overwhelming, vaporizing buildings, igniting fires, and exposing the world to that terrifying reality of nuclear warfare. And the Japanese leadership, witnessing both the immediate devastation and the potential for further annihilation, finally capitulated, ending a conflict that had engulfed multiple continents and reshaped the global balance of power. And reflecting on the broader arc of the Pacific War, it becomes evident that the United States' victory was not the result of any single battle or weapon, but of an integrated approach combining courage, intelligence, industrial capacity, strategic planning, and psychological warfare, beginning with the symbolic Doolittle Raid over Tokyo, which, despite minimal physical damage, had an enormous impact on enemy morale and strategy, forcing Japan to spread its forces thinner, making subsequent American advances more feasible, and each island battle that followed, whether at Midway, Guadalcanal, Iwo Jima, or Okinawa, built upon the lessons learned, testing leadership, coordination, and human endurance under extreme conditions, and the relentless pressure exerted by the United States, through naval, air, and land campaigns, combined with intelligence breakthroughs that allowed for precise targeting and anticipation of enemy movements, steadily eroded Japan's capacity to resist. While the industrial output of American factories produced ships, aircraft, weapons, and supplies at a scale and speed unmatched by the enemy, ensuring that every loss could be replaced and every offensive sustained, and the culmination of these efforts, both strategic and psychological, was the deployment of atomic weapons, which, coupled with Soviet entry into the war against Japan, rendered continued resistance impossible, and thus the surrender on August 15, 1945, was the outcome not only of overwhelming military might but also of cumulative strategic brilliance, human courage, technological innovation, and the psychological impact of continuous and escalating pressure, and the legacy of this victory, beginning with the courage of men like Captain James Doolittle and continuing through every pilot, soldier, sailor, and civilian involved in the Pacific campaigns, remains a testament to the power of audacity, planning, adaptability, and perseverance in the face of seemingly insurmountable odds, demonstrating that the outcome of wars is determined not solely by firepower but by the capacity to integrate vision, courage, intelligence, and execution across vast theaters of conflict. And the story of America's campaign against Japan serves as a historical lesson in how strategic planning, calculated risk, and relentless pressure can achieve results that change the course of history, proving that even the smallest acts of heroism, when aligned with a broader strategy, can produce consequences that resonate far beyond the immediate moment, shaping nations, geopolitics, and the lives of millions. And the Doolittle Raid, the pivotal battles across the Pacific Islands, the firebombings, and the final atomic strikes collectively illustrate the multidimensional approach required for victory, blending tactical skill, strategic foresight, technological innovation, and human courage, and together these elements forged a path that led from the devastation of Pearl Harbor to the surrender of Japan, closing the chapter on the deadliest conflict in human history while laying the foundations for a new world order. And throughout this journey, the lessons of resilience, audacity, intelligence, and courage remain timeless, emphasizing that history is shaped not merely by numbers and machinery but by the spirit, strategy, and will of those willing to act decisively in the face of unimaginable challenges, proving that the combination of planning, bravery, innovation, and relentless execution can overcome even the most formidable adversaries. And this legacy endures, inspiring future generations to understand that courage and strategy together have the power to change the course of human events and define the very nature of heroism and global leadership.